The moment Karen lifted the spray can toward his dog, Mark knew trouble had arrived. What she didn't know was that her petty act would trigger something far bigger: an HOA scandal, police involvement, and a shocking twist that no one in the neighborhood saw coming. But it all started on a bright morning, when Mark simply wanted to take his loyal service dog, Buddy, for a walk. Mark had moved into the quiet suburban neighborhood just months ago. After serving in the military, Buddy wasn't just his companion, he was his lifeline, trained to detect sudden health episodes that Mark sometimes experienced. For him, Buddy wasn't a pet. He was family, and legally protected under service dog laws. Still, that didn't stop HOA Karen, the self-proclaimed guardian of the block, from picking a fight. She claimed Buddy barked too loudly, that his fur was messy, and even that he lowered property values. Mark tried to stay calm. He reminded her that Buddy was not only well-trained but also allowed under federal law, regardless of HOA rules. But Karen didn't want to hear reason. Her tone grew sharper, her threats louder, and then, one day, as Mark and Buddy passed her driveway, she reached for a spray bottle filled with harsh cleaning chemicals and aimed it right at Buddy's face. The hiss of the spray filled the air. Mark's heart stopped. What Karen didn't realize was that this single act would not just bring the police to her door, it would unravel every bit of control she thought she had. But this was only the beginning of the war Karen had unknowingly started. Mark shielded Buddy instantly, his hands catching most of the mist, but the damage was done. Buddy whimpered and stepped back, shaking his head. Mark's blood boiled, but he fought to keep calm. Years of discipline taught him that reacting with rage would only give people like Karen more power. Instead, he pulled out his phone and began recording. "Did you just spray my service dog?" he asked, his voice steady but icy. Karen, standing smugly with her arms crossed, replied, "Your mutt doesn't belong here. HOA rules say no animals disrupting the peace. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't live here." Her words were sharp, but Mark had something stronger: the truth. Buddy wore his bright red vest marked service animal. Federal law was on Mark's side, but Karen didn't care. That evening, Mark contacted the police, filing a report. He showed them the video, Buddy's certification papers, and explained the situation. The officers took one look at the recording and their faces hardened. "Sir, this isn't just harassment. This is a federal offense. Interfering with a service dog carries serious consequences." Karen didn't realize that her spray tantrum had crossed a line. The police promised an immediate investigation. Word began to spread around the neighborhood, whispers echoing about the woman who might have committed a federal crime against a veteran's service animal, but Karen wasn't worried. Not yet. In her mind, she was untouchable, the HOA president's right hand, the rule enforcer. She thought she could bully her way out of anything. Mark knew differently. He had patience, evidence, and the law, and soon, Karen would learn the hard way that some battles couldn't be won with arrogance. 2 days later, Karen stormed to Mark's doorstep. Her usual smug expression was replaced with forced confidence, though her voice shook beneath it. "You're making a mistake," she snapped. "That video won't hold up. The HOA backs me. Always." Mark stood calmly in the doorway, Buddy resting quietly by his feet. "This isn't an HOA matter, Karen. It's federal law. The police already told me they're investigating." Karen's face flushed red. "You think you can outsmart me? I've run this neighborhood for years. Nothing happens without me knowing." But her shouting was interrupted by the sound of a police cruiser pulling into the cul-de-sac. 2 officers stepped out, walking directly toward Karen. She froze. Her neighbors peeked through blinds and cracked doors, curious about the unfolding scene. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions regarding a service dog harassment report," one officer said firmly. Karen's composure slipped. Her eyes darted between Mark, the officers, and the small crowd of neighbors now gathering outside. For the first time, she didn't look powerful, she looked cornered. The officers escorted her aside, their voices low but serious. Karen stammered excuses. "It was just cleaning spray. The dog was too close to my driveway." But the officers weren't buying it. Mark's video showed everything clearly. Buddy sat calmly by Mark's side, as if he understood justice was finally moving in their favor. But Mark also knew Karen wasn't done. HOA Karen never backed down quietly. If she couldn't beat him with intimidation, she'd try something else. And judging by the fire still burning in her eyes, she was already planning her next move. The neighborhood was buzzing. Whispers traveled faster than wildfire. Some residents were quietly rooting for Mark, tired of Karen's endless rules, her power trips, her constant threats. Others feared what she might do next. Karen, however, doubled down. She began holding emergency HOA meetings, telling neighbors that Mark was weaponizing his dog against her. She painted herself as the victim, claiming Buddy was aggressive and dangerous. Mark knew her lies couldn't erase the truth, but it still frustrated him. If she wants war, he muttered, then I'll fight with the only weapons I need, facts and the law. And then it happened. One evening, Mark received a knock at the door. It was an officer with a folder. "Mr. Carter, we've escalated the case. This isn't just local. We're forwarding it to the Department of Justice. Harassing a service animal falls under federal jurisdiction." The words hit Karen like a storm. When she overheard neighbors discussing it, her face drained of color. She had thought the HOA shielded her from consequences. But now, the federal government was involved. Still, Karen wasn't ready to admit defeat. She filed complaints, demanded emergency rule changes, and even tried to convince others to sign petitions against Buddy. But the more she pushed, the more isolated she became. Neighbors avoided her. Friends stopped returning her calls. For the first time, Karen was losing control, and Mark? He didn't need revenge. He just needed justice, and it was coming faster than Karen ever imagined. Weeks passed, and Karen's empire crumbled piece by piece. The HOA board grew tired of her antics, especially when lawyers started circling. They realized Karen's obsession wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. Legal letters began arriving, warning the HOA that their endorsement of Karen's behavior could cost them dearly. Mark stayed patient. He continued his quiet routine with Buddy, walking each morning as if nothing had happened. Yet every step reminded Karen of her mistake. Finally, the day came. A black SUV pulled up in front of Karen's house. Two federal agents stepped out, their badges flashing in the sunlight. The entire block fell silent as neighbors peeked from porches. Karen emerged from her front door, her confidence gone. She tried to argue, tried to explain, but her voice cracked under pressure. The agents calmly informed her of the charges: interfering with a service animal, harassment, and potential fines that could bankrupt her. Mark didn't gloat. He simply watched, Buddy at his side, knowing the law had done what arrogance couldn't. But the story wasn't over. Because what came next would shock not just Karen, but the entire HOA leadership and change the neighborhood forever. The HOA called an emergency meeting. For years, Karen had been their enforcer, their loudest voice. But now she was their liability. Neighbors demanded answers. Why had they allowed her so much unchecked power? Why did they let her bully residents? The board fumbled with excuses. But then Mark stood up. Calm, steady, his voice carried weight. He explained what happened with Buddy, how Karen escalated, and how the HOA's silence allowed it. By the time he finished, the room was buzzing, not with support for Karen, but with anger at the board. One member finally said it aloud: "If we don't remove her, this HOA is finished." The vote was swift. Karen was stripped of all authority. Her influence, once untouchable, vanished overnight. The same neighbors she lorded over now turned their backs on her. As for Mark, he wasn't interested in revenge. "I didn't move here to fight battles," he told them. "I moved here for peace. And I think it's time this neighborhood learned what peace actually feels like." But one final twist remained. The HOA didn't just remove Karen, they made a surprising offer to Mark, and that was the part Karen never saw coming. The board approached Mark quietly after the meeting. "We need stability," one member admitted. "And after what you've been through, after how you handled this, you're the kind of leader this community needs." Mark was stunned. "You're asking me to run the HOA?" The members nodded. For the first time, the HOA wasn't looking for a tyrant, they wanted fairness, calm, and someone who knew the law better than anyone. Mark considered it, then agreed on one condition: this HOA must never again be used as a weapon against the people who live here. The room erupted in agreement. Karen, meanwhile, watched from the back. Her eyes were wide, her lips trembling. The power she once clung to had been handed to the very man she tried to destroy. It was the ultimate twist of fate. As Mark walked out with Buddy by his side, neighbors clapped. The service dog, calm and loyal as ever, wagged his tail proudly. Justice had been served, not with anger, but with truth, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.